The cursor is trembling on the screen. Not because the computer is nervous, because we are. The gel on your scalp is cold. The room smells like alcohol wipes and warm electronics. And the question hanging in the air is almost unbearable. If a machine can decode signals from my brain, what part of me is still private? What part is still me? Stay here with me, in this room, right now. You can hear the quiet hum of the amplifier. You can feel that strange mix of hope and dread, because behind this science are real lives. Paralysis. Locked-in syndrome. Phantom limbs that ache like ghosts. Depression that won't let go. People who can think clearly but can't speak, can't move, can't tell their own story to the world. And somewhere between the promise and the panic is a claim that keeps showing up in headlines. We can read your thoughts. I'm Rowan K. Mercer. This is the Science Audit. And today we're going to separate what's real from what merely sounds like science fiction. We're going to draw a clean line between two things the public conversation keeps blending together: reading neurocorrelates versus reading thoughts, and writing stimulation versus writing experience. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: brain, computer interfaces, BCIs, can feel like mind reading even when they're not. And they can change someone's life even when they don't touch anything like a private inner monologue. So what is actually happening in the wires, the algorithms, and the living brain? And where is the boundary, if there is one? Picture the setup. A technician parts your hair in careful rows, marks the scalp with a soft pencil like a cartographer mapping an unknown coastline. Each electrode is a little listening post. Not for thoughts, not for words, not for secrets, but for electricity. Tiny voltage changes on the scalp that leak out from billions of neurons firing underneath, muffled by bone and skin like a conversation heard through a wall. That's EEG, electroencephalography. It's non-invasive, which means it's safer and easier to use, but it's also blurrier. Like trying to understand a stadium crowd by listening from outside the arena. You can detect rhythms, cheers, waves, the rising roar. But you won't identify a single person's sentence. And EEG is only one tool. There's FNIRS, functional near-infrared spectroscopy, which shines light into the head and measures changes in blood oxygen. Not neurons directly, blood, the supply chain. It's like looking at a city from above at night and inferring activity by how the power grid brightens in different neighborhoods. Slower than EEG, but it can tell you which regions are getting busy. Then there's MEG, magnetoencephalography, detecting the tiny magnetic fields produced by electrical currents in the brain. It's exquisitely precise, but the machine is huge and expensive, a helmet of sensors that looks like science fiction because it basically is. Now we cross a threshold. Invasive BCIs. This is where the headlines get louder, because the signals get sharper. ECOG, electrocorticography, places grids directly on the surface of the cortex. You're not outside the stadium anymore, you're in the stands. You still don't have every voice, but you can tell which section is chanting. And deeper still, Utah arrays, little beds of microscopic needles that sit in motor cortex and pick up the spikes, action potentials, from individual neurons. Now you're near the players. You can track specific units, specific firing patterns, like listening to a small group of musicians rather than the whole orchestra at once. And there are depth electrodes, often implanted for clinical reasons, like epilepsy monitoring, giving researchers rare access to structures deep inside the brain. In these cases, the BCI is not just an experiment. It's intertwined with medicine, risk, consent, and urgency. So what are we actually measuring? Let's be almost painfully precise, because precision is where the truth lives. We measure voltage fluctuations. We measure local field potentials, synchronized activity from populations of neurons. We measure firing rates, how often a neuron spikes. We measure patterns in time and space. We do not measure meaning directly. We do not plug into an electrode and see the word mother, the image of an ocean, the taste of coffee. Meaning is not a sticker attached to a spike. Meaning is a relationship between a pattern and a context and a history and a body and a goal. And BCIs, at their core, are pattern mapping machines. Here's the moment the magic seems to happen. You're watching the screen. A cursor is centered. The instruction is deceptively simple. Imagine moving your right hand. Don't actually move it, just imagine. At first, nothing happens. Your brain lights up in its own private weather, and the cursor just sits there like it doesn't care. The algorithm begins in ignorance, guessing. It takes in features, frequency bands, amplitudes, spiking patterns, and it tries to connect them to labels. Intended right, intended left, rest. And then something changes. The model updates its weights. You try again. Your brain, without you noticing, starts to explore subtle shifts in attention, in muscle tension, in imagined movement. The cursor twitches. Not because the machine has discovered your secret thought, but because two learning systems, biological and silicon, have started to negotiate a shared language. You feel it in your chest the first time it moves in the direction you wanted. That's not science fiction. That's agency. That's a human intention finding a path out of the skull and into the world. This is the part the headlines flatten. They say, mind reading. But what's often happening is closer to mind training. The decoder learns you. You learn the decoder. The readout is co-created. Let's linger on that, because it's the hinge of the whole story. When you train a BCI, you don't simply reveal a pre-existing code for move right. You help build a control policy, an internal habit, so that a certain pattern reliably produces a certain output. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. The bike doesn't read your thoughts. It responds to balance and force. You adapt to it, and suddenly it feels like an extension of your body. BCIs can become extensions too, but the path there is work, feedback, and plasticity. Plasticity is the brain's quiet superpower, the ability to rewire, to assign new meaning to old circuits, to recruit new pathways when the old ones fail. A BCI succeeds when plasticity does half the work. The interface is not only a machine. It's a negotiation treaty between tissue and technology. Now, reading is only half the promise. The other half is writing, stimulation. And here, we already have some of the most profound and underappreciated success stories in modern medicine. Consider cochlear implants. Sound, air pressure waves, gets converted into electrical patterns delivered to the auditory nerve. At first, many users describe it as strange, metallic, artificial. It's not restored hearing, like rewinding a tape to the original track. It's a new sensory alphabet. But the brain learns. The brain adapts. And for many people, that adaptation becomes music, conversation, connection. Or retinal prostheses and visual cortex stimulation. People can perceive phosphenes, little flashes or points of light, like pixels in a dark field. It is not vision as you remember it. It's a new language of light. And again, the brain can learn to interpret it, to turn an unnatural signal into a usable sense. Or somatosensory stimulation, writing touch into the brain. By stimulating specific areas of sensory cortex, researchers can induce feelings of pressure, location cues, even motion across the skin. And those cues can guide a robotic hand, grip strength, finger placement, the difference between slipping and holding. So the machine can read patterns and write patterns. But does that mean it can read thoughts and write experiences? That's where the edge of understanding begins to glow. Let's name the paradox plainly. BCIs can feel like mind reading while actually being a loop of mutual learning. The system learns to predict what you'll do in a specific task. You learn to produce signals the system can predict. In that loop, it becomes tempting to say the machine has access to you. But then reality bites. In ways the headlines don't show. First, non-stationarity. The brain is not a stable signal generator. It drifts. Your signals change with fatigue, with stress, with sleep, with medication, with mood, with hydration. Even tiny shifts in electrode position can reshape the recorded pattern. A decoder that worked yesterday can fail today, not because your intention changed, but because the measurement changed. Second, context dependence. The same neural pattern can mean different things in different tasks. Imagine a musician playing the same chord in two different songs. The chord is identical, but the meaning is different because the harmony around it is different. Brains are like that. A pattern doesn't carry a universal label. It carries a relationship to everything else happening. Third, identifiability. This is a technical word with a deeply human implication. If multiple internal states can produce the same output, then decoding becomes ambiguous. It's like seeing footprints in snow and trying to reconstruct not just the animal, but its mood, its destination, its memories. Different stories can fit the same prints. Now I want to run a thought experiment with you, one that sounds simple until it isn't. Call it the silent sentence. You're going to imagine saying a sentence in your head. Not out loud. Not mouthing it. Just inner speech, the voice that feels like you. Is that brain state unique enough to decode reliably without prompts? If I record your brain activity right now, can I reconstruct the exact words? Not speech-related activity. Not a likely category. But the sentence itself? Modern speech BCIs are astonishing, but they live inside constraints. Often the participant is asked to attempt speech or imagine speech while the system is trained on known targets, a set vocabulary, repeated phrases, limited contexts. With enough data and calibration, models can map patterns to outputs, sometimes synthesizing text, sometimes even producing a voice. For someone who cannot speak, this can be life-changing. But that is not the same as passively eavesdropping on open-ended inner monologue across contexts. Your private thoughts are not a fixed broadcast signal. They are a shifting choreography of memory, prediction, emotion, and bodily state. Without context, the same inner word can ride on different neural scaffolding, and the same neural scaffolding can support different words. So when someone says, "We can read thoughts," the first audit question is, what task? What constraints? What training? What prompts? What error rate? And under what conditions does it fail? Because the difference between "I can decode which of 4 options you're attending to" and "I can decode your secret fear at 3 a.m. is not a difference of degree. It's a difference of kind. Now let's turn to writing, because this is where the philosophical stakes sharpen. We can trigger phosphenes. We can trigger tingles. We can trigger tones. We can deliver pattern stimulation that the brain can learn to interpret. But can we write the exact feeling of your childhood piano? Not the notes, not the recognition of a melody, but the entire lived texture, the weight of the bench, the smell of dust and sunlight, the small nervous pride when someone listened from the doorway. That's where we collide with the hard problem of qualia, the raw, what it is like, of experience. And here's the audit. Stimulation can cause an experience, but controlling the precise meaning of that experience is another matter. Meaning is distributed. It doesn't live in one electrode's neighborhood. It lives in networks that braid sensation with memory, expectation, emotion, and the body's internal signals. Even a simple sensation, like pressure on the index finger, is not just a pressure signal. It's also the prediction of what that pressure implies. Am I holding something fragile? Is it slipping? Is it mine? Is it hot? Is it safe? The brain is not a camera. It's a model builder. It constantly guesses what's out there and updates the guess. A BCI that writes stimulation is injecting data into that model. The model decides what it means. And then, somewhere in this tension, the boundary becomes visible. The mind still wins, not by magic, not by mysticism, but because meaning is an emergent, embodied loop, brain plus body plus world plus history. A decoder reads the loop's footprints, not the whole loop. This is the point where many people feel either relief or disappointment. Relief, because maybe your private inner life isn't about to be live-streamed. Disappointment, because maybe the technology isn't as omnipotent as the hype suggests. But I want you to feel something else too, gratitude and awe. Because even partial access can restore agency. Even a crude sensory alphabet can become a bridge. Even a cursor trembling on a screen can be the first syllable of a person returning to conversation. Now we have to talk about what this means for reality, because BCIs are more than tools. They are mirrors. And mirrors can teach you, but they can also confuse you. A BCI reflects patterns, not essence. It can show correlations, neurocorrelates, between activity and behavior. But correlation is not possession. If I can predict what you'll choose in a narrow task, that doesn't mean I own yourself. It means I've learned a mapping between measured signals and outcomes under conditions we carefully staged. Still, don't mistake this for comfort. The ethical stakes are real, and they are not science fiction telepathy. Neural data is not thoughts, but it can still be biometric, like a fingerprint made of dynamics. It can be predictive in ways you didn't consent to. It can reveal fatigue, attention, arousal, even traits correlated with clinical states. And the risk is not that someone will hear your secret sentence. The risk is inference at scale, corporations, governments, institutions using patterns to classify, nudge, deny, or coerce. Ethics here is a physics of power. Who owns the signal? Who stores it? Who secures it? Who can demand it? Who can interpret it, and with what confidence? Consent is not a checkbox if the downstream uses are opaque. Security is not optional if the device can also stimulate. And privacy is not only about the content of your thoughts, it's about the ability to live unmeasured, unprofiled, unpressured. So where are we headed? Technically, toward closed-loop systems, read and write, where the device doesn't just decode intention, it adapts in real time. Toward better sensors, more stable electrodes, less invasive approaches, improved signal quality. Toward better models, algorithms that can handle drift, context uncertainty. Toward personalization, systems tuned to one person's brain, not averaged across strangers. Clinically, toward therapies for depression, OCD, epilepsy, chronic pain, systems that detect pathological patterns and intervene with stimulation. Some of this already exists in early forms. But each step forward raises the same demand: audit the claim. What exactly is being measured? What exactly is being changed? And what is the person's experience of that change? And philosophically, toward a deeper lesson that refuses to fit into a headline. The mind is not a file you can copy. It's a living process you can only partially sample. Even if we could record every spike, we would still face the question of meaning, because meaning is not just in the spikes. It's in the life they belong to. Now come back with me to the lab. The cursor is still there, waiting. You take a breath. You imagine the hand movement again. The decoder has been training, adjusting. Your brain has been adjusting too, quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. And then it happens. The cursor moves cleanly to the target. Not a twitch, an intentional glide. The room changes. Someone laughs softly, like they didn't mean to. Someone's eyes fill with tears and they blink them away, embarrassed and proud at the same time. If you were expecting a story about machines stealing thoughts, this is where the truth lands differently. The person smiles, not because the machine invaded their mind, but because a human intention found a new path into the world. So here's the synthesis, and I want it to be crisp enough to carry with you. BCIs do not read thoughts the way we look at sentences. They measure physical signals, voltages, fields, spikes, and use models to map patterns to labels under constraints. They can achieve astonishing things when the brain adapts, when training creates a shared code, when context is controlled. They can write stimulation that becomes perception, especially when plasticity turns a strange signal into a usable sense. But the private, lived meaning of experience, the full loop of memory, body, world, and history, remains more than a pattern on a screen. Now a contemplative takeaway, something you can test inside your own life. Tonight, when you hear your inner voice, ask yourself, where does it live? Is it a sound? A muscle plan? A memory? A prediction? If someone recorded your brain in that moment, what would they actually capture? Your words, or the shadow your words cast on the body? And the next great question, the one that opens the next door. If meaning is an emergent loop, not a stored file, then what happens when we build technologies that can join that loop? Not just reading, not just writing, but participating, shaping attention, shaping perception, shaping mood. Who do we become when our tools don't just extend our hands, but begin to extend our minds? If you want to keep going, watch the video YouTube is placing on the end screen, because it's the next step in this investigation, and it's designed to deepen what you just realized. And subscribe if you want audits like this regularly. Not hype, not fear, just the clearest path through the most important scientific mysteries of our time. And I want to hear from you in the comments, directly. What feels more unsettling to you, the idea of mind reading, or the quieter reality of prediction and inference at scale from neural data?